I never thought delivering propane would land me in the middle of a legal nightmare. But here I was, sitting in a courthouse in Maplewood, New Jersey, watching a woman who had made my life hell for 6 months finally get what she deserved. My name is Travis Ventura, and I had been driving propane delivery trucks for Morrison Energy Solutions for the past 8 years. The job was straightforward, paid decently, and I enjoyed being on the road instead of trapped behind a desk. Most customers were pleasant enough, grateful to have their homes heated during those brutal northeastern winters. Most customers, anyway. Then there was Patricia Henderson. Patricia was the head of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, a sprawling planned community just outside Maplewood. She was 53 years old with that specific haircut that somehow all women like her seemed to have, the kind that screamed for a manager before even speaking. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a vanity plate that read HOA Boss, and treated her position like she was running a small nation rather than overseeing a neighborhood of 200 homes. It all started on a freezing Tuesday morning in late January. I had been making my usual rounds through Willow Creek Estates, delivering to my regular customers. The neighborhood was nice enough, with cookie-cutter colonials and perfectly manicured lawns, even under the snow. Everything was beige or gray, with the occasional maroon door to break up the monotony. The HOA had strict rules about exterior colors, landscaping, and pretty much everything else you could imagine. I pulled my truck up to 428 Maple Ridge Drive, the home of an elderly couple named the Garcias. They were sweet people, always offering me coffee when the weather was particularly bad. I had just started the delivery process, hooking up my hose to their tank, when a white Lexus came screeching into the driveway behind my truck, blocking me in. Patricia Henderson emerged from her vehicle like a storm cloud given human form. She wore designer workout clothes that probably cost more than my weekly paycheck and oversized sunglasses, despite the overcast sky. Her highlighted hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that seemed to pull her entire face upward. "Excuse me," she snapped, marching toward me. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" I looked down at my delivery hose, then back at her, confused. "Making a propane delivery to the Garcias. They called it in last week. Do you have authorization from the HOA to operate a commercial vehicle within Willow Creek Estates?" I blinked. "Madam, I have been delivering to this neighborhood for 6 years. I have authorization from the homeowners I serve." Patricia pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of my truck. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the Willow Creek HOA bylaws, all commercial vehicles must receive prior written approval from the board before entering the community. This includes delivery vehicles, contractors, and service personnel. The Garcia's front door opened, and Mrs. Garcia stepped out, wrapping her cardigan tighter against the cold. "Patricia, what is going on? We need this delivery. Our tank is nearly empty." "Then you should have filed the proper paperwork with the HOA, Dorothy," Patricia said without even looking at her. "All commercial activities within the community must be pre-approved." "That is ridiculous," Mrs. Garcia protested. "We have been getting deliveries for 15 years without any problems." "Well, the rules have changed," Patricia said. "I am updating our enforcement procedures to ensure our community maintains its standards." I tried to keep my voice level. "Madam, I need to finish this delivery. These folks need heat, and I have other customers waiting." Patricia stepped closer to my truck, positioning herself between me and my hose connection. "You will not be finishing anything until you leave this community and file the appropriate forms. Furthermore, all future deliveries will need to be scheduled through me personally to ensure they do not conflict with community activities or disturb our residents. Are you serious right now? I felt my patience wearing thin. It is 20 degrees outside. These people need propane. What I am serious about is maintaining order in this community, Patricia said, crossing her arms. If you refuse to comply, I will call the police and have your vehicle towed for trespassing. Mrs. Garcia looked distraught. Please, Patricia, this is our heat. What are we supposed to do? You can go stay with your daughter until you sort out the proper authorization, Patricia said dismissively. Or perhaps this will serve as a lesson about following community guidelines. I wanted to argue more, but I could see this woman was not going to budge. More importantly, I did not want to get the Garcias in trouble with their HOA. I had heard horror stories about HOAs fining residents thousands of dollars for minor infractions. Against my better judgment, I started disconnecting my equipment. I am really sorry, I told Mrs. Garcia quietly. I will talk to my supervisor and figure this out. Mrs. Garcia nodded, looking defeated. Her husband had appeared in the doorway now, leaning on his walker, looking confused about the commotion. I felt terrible leaving them like that, but Patricia stood there watching me with her arms crossed, a smug expression on her face that made my blood boil. As I packed up and climbed back into my truck, Patricia tapped on my window. I rolled it down reluctantly. Here is my card, she said, handing me a business card that listed at least 6 different titles after her name. All future delivery requests for Willow Creek Estates will go through me. I expect 24 hours notice minimum, and I will need to approve the time and date based on community needs. Madam, we have over 30 customers in this neighborhood. I cannot coordinate individual appointments for each one through you. Then I suggest you figure out a system that works, she said, because those are the new rules. Take it or leave it. I drove away fuming, immediately calling my supervisor, Mike Richardson. Mike had been with Morrison Energy for 20 years and had seen just about everything. When I explained the situation, he let out a long sigh. Let me guess, HOA president, he asked. How did you know? Because we deal with this nonsense at least once a year. Some board member gets elected and suddenly decides they are going to micromanage everything. Usually they back down once they realize the headache it causes their own residents. So what do we do about the Garcias? I will make some calls, see if I can get this sorted out. In the meantime, proceed with your other deliveries in that neighborhood. If this Patricia woman shows up again, call me immediately. I had 3 more stops in Willow Creek that day. At the first one, I managed to complete the delivery without incident. At the second, Patricia showed up halfway through, parked behind my truck again, and demanded I cease operations immediately. She called the police this time, and I ended up spending 40 minutes on the side of the road while a very annoyed Officer Daniels explained to her that propane delivery was not actually a criminal matter, and that she could not have me arrested for trespassing when I had been invited by the homeowner. Madam, these people need heating fuel, Officer Daniels said, his patience clearly wearing thin. He is providing a necessary service, but he does not have HOA authorization, Patricia insisted. That is a civil matter between you and your residents, the officer said. I cannot and will not prevent this man from doing his job. Patricia was furious, but finally moved her vehicle. I completed the delivery while she stood there photographing everything and talking loudly on her phone about consulting her lawyer. When I left, I saw her knocking on the homeowner's door, presumably to harass them about filing the proper paperwork. My third stop was at 892 Brookside Lane. I pulled up cautiously, half expecting Patricia to materialize from thin air. The homeowner, A guy in his 30s named Ryan Chen came out to meet me. "Hey, heads up," he said. "Patricia Henderson has been sending emails to the whole neighborhood saying that all propane deliveries need to go through her now. People are pretty upset about it." "Yeah, I have had the pleasure of meeting her today," I said. "She is on a power trip," Ryan said, shaking his head. "She got elected president last year and has been making up new rules constantly. Last month she tried to ban children from playing in their own front yards because it was unsightly. The month before that, she attempted to mandate that all vehicles be kept in garages at all times. That is insane. Tell me about it. Half the neighborhood is ready to recall her, but she has a few loyal followers who back her up on everything. They form a voting bloc that makes it hard to override her decisions. I completed Ryan's delivery without incident, but the whole situation left a bad taste in my mouth. When I got back to the depot that evening, Mike called me into his office. "Okay, so I spoke with our legal team," he said. "This HOA cannot legally prevent you from making deliveries to customers who request them. However, they can make life difficult for their residents if the residents do not follow their internal rules. So, what are we supposed to do?" "We are going to send a formal letter to the HOA board explaining that propane delivery is a utility service, and that attempting to block or control it could be seen as a safety hazard. We will offer to work with them on a reasonable notification system, but we are not going to let one person dictate our entire route schedule." "Do you think that will work?" Mike shrugged. "It should. Most HOAs back down when they realize they could face liability issues. But in the meantime, I need you to continue servicing our customers there. If Patricia Henderson gives you trouble, document everything." Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia made my life miserable. She showed up at almost every delivery I made in Willow Creek Estates. She filed complaints with the township. She sent multiple emails to Morrison Energy's corporate office demanding that I be fired. She even started a Facebook group called Protecting Willow Creek, where she posted photos of my truck with captions about how I was violating community standards. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was making a delivery to a single mother named Jennifer Brooks, who lived at the far end of the development. Jennifer had 2 young kids, and she had specifically called to request an urgent delivery because her tank was running low, and the temperature was supposed to drop into single digits that night. I pulled up to her house and started my delivery. 10 minutes in, Patricia arrived with 2 other women I recognized from the neighborhood. They parked across the street and just stood there, watching and filming me on their phones. Jennifer came out, looking stressed. "I am so sorry about this. Patricia has been harassing me all week about using you as a supplier." "It is not your fault," I said. "Just let me finish this up." That is when Patricia marched across the street with her entourage in tow. "Jennifer, I warned you about this. You are in direct violation of HOA bylaws." "Patricia, my children need heat," Jennifer said, her voice shaking. "Then you should use an approved vendor," Patricia said. "I have compiled a list of companies willing to work with our scheduling requirements." "Those companies are twice as expensive," Jennifer protested. "That is not my concern. Quality comes at a price." I had heard enough. "Madam, you need to step back and let me finish this delivery." "Or what?" Patricia challenged, stepping closer. "Or I will call the police again, and I will also be filing a formal complaint with the township about harassment and interference with utility services." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "You are making a very big mistake. Do you know who my husband is?" "He is a partner at Henderson and Associates, one of the biggest law firms in the state. We will bury you and your little company in lawsuits." "Feel free to try," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my heart was racing. But right now, I am finishing this delivery." Patricia pulled out her phone and started dialing. "We will see about that." What happened next shocked everyone. Patricia called 911 and reported that I was trespassing and threatening her. When the police arrived, she claimed I had been verbally abusive and that she feared for her safety. The responding officers, one of whom was Officer Daniels again, looked thoroughly fed up. "Sir, did you threaten this woman?" Officer Daniels asked me. "No, sir." I told her I would file a complaint about harassment, which I am entitled to do. Jennifer stepped forward. "Officer, Patricia is lying. Travis has been nothing but professional. She is the one who has been harassing him and me." The other two women with Patricia immediately backed her up, claiming they witnessed me behaving aggressively. It was their word against ours, and the whole situation was escalating into something ridiculous. Finally, Officer Daniels held up his hand. "Okay, everyone calm down." "Sir, are you finished with your delivery?" "Just about," I said. "I need another 5 minutes. Then finish up and leave." "Madam," he turned to Patricia, "you need to stop calling 911 for non-emergencies. This is the 3rd time in 2 weeks. If we have to come out here again for this nonsense, you will be cited for misuse of emergency services." Patricia looked outraged but did not argue with the officer. I completed my delivery in tense silence while everyone watched. When I finally left, I called Mike immediately and told him everything. "That is it," Mike said. "I am escalating this to corporate. We are not going to keep putting up with this." Morrison Energy's legal team sent a cease and desist letter to Patricia Henderson and the Willow Creek HOA board, formally notifying them that their interference with our business operations was unlawful and that any further harassment would result in legal action. We also filed a complaint with the Maplewood Township about the HOA attempting to restrict utility services. For a few days, things were quiet. I continued my deliveries in Willow Creek, and Patricia did not show up. I actually started to think maybe the letter had worked and she had finally backed off. Then I got a call from Mrs. Garcia, the elderly woman from my first encounter with Patricia. "Travis, I am so sorry to bother you," she said, sounding upset. "But the HOA has filed a violation against us for using an unauthorized vendor. They are threatening to fine us $500. What? They cannot do that. They are saying that we violated the commercial vehicle policy. We got a formal notice yesterday." I was furious. "Mrs. Garcia, please send me a copy of that notice. We are going to fight this." Over the next week, I learned that Patricia had filed violations against 8 different households in Willow Creek for using Morrison Energy's services. Each family was facing a $500 fine. Most of them were terrified of fighting back because they did not want to get on Patricia's bad side or rack up additional violations. Mike and I met with our corporate legal team, and they decided to take action. They sent another letter, this time threatening to sue the HOA for tortious interference with business relations. They also reached out to a local news station about the story. That is when things got really interesting. Channel 7 News sent a reporter named Amanda Foster to cover the story. She interviewed several Willow Creek residents who were being fined, including the Garcias and Jennifer Brooks. She also attempted to interview Patricia Henderson. The news segment aired on a Wednesday evening. I watched it at home with my girlfriend, Sarah. Amanda Foster did an excellent job laying out the situation, explaining how an HOA president was attempting to control when and how residents could receive propane deliveries, putting vulnerable families at risk during winter. They showed footage of Mrs. Garcia, who became emotional on camera talking about how scared she was of losing her home over a $500 fine she could not afford. Then they cut to Patricia Henderson, who had agreed to an on-camera interview. It was a disaster for her. "Miss Henderson, why is the HOA attempting to restrict propane deliveries?" Amanda asked. "We are not restricting anything," Patricia said with a tight smile. "We are simply ensuring that all commercial activities in our community follow proper procedures." "But these procedures did not exist until you became president. Why the sudden change? Communities must evolve. We have standards to maintain. Even if those standards leave elderly residents without heat, no one is without heat. They can use approved vendors. The approved vendors you have listed are significantly more expensive. Are you receiving any compensation from those companies?" Patricia's face flushed. "That is a ridiculous accusation. This interview is over." She ripped off her microphone and stormed away from the camera. The segment ended with Amanda Foster encouraging any other Willow Creek residents facing similar issues to contact the news station. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Over 30 households reached out to Channel 7 with stories about Patricia's overreach. People complained about excessive fines, arbitrary rule enforcement, and intimidation tactics. The HOA's Facebook page was flooded with angry comments. Several residents started a petition to remove Patricia from the board. Patricia doubled down. She sent an email to all Willow Creek residents, threatening legal action against anyone who spoke to the media without board approval. She claimed the news coverage was defamatory and that she was consulting with her attorney husband about filing lawsuits. That is when I decided to change my approach entirely. After discussing it with Mike, we made a strategic decision. Willow Creek Estates was not the only neighborhood in our service area. We had customers scattered across a dozen different communities within a 30-mile radius. My route had been designed for maximum efficiency, which meant I typically started in Willow Creek early in the morning and then worked my way outward to other areas. We restructured my entire route. Instead of starting in Willow Creek, I began scheduling those deliveries for the end of my day, or sometimes not at all if I ran out of time. Since I could only make a certain number of stops per day, this meant that Willow Creek customers were often getting pushed to the next day or even later in the week. The first person to notice was, ironically, Patricia Henderson herself. She called Morrison Energy's main office on a Friday afternoon, demanding to speak with a manager. Mike took the call and put it on speaker so I could hear. "My propane delivery was supposed to be today," Patricia said, her voice sharp. "Where is your driver?" "I am looking at the schedule now," Mike said calmly. "It appears your delivery has been rescheduled for next week." "Next week? That is unacceptable. I am almost out of propane." "I understand your concern, Miss Henderson. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing harassment of our driver and the numerous complaints and police calls in your community, we have had to restructure our routes. Willow Creek Estates now receives lower priority scheduling." There was a long pause. "Lower priority? You cannot do that." "Actually, we can. We are a private company and we have the right to organize our operations as we see fit. Given the hostile environment your HOA has created, we have determined that servicing your community is inefficient and potentially risky for our employees." "This is retaliation," Patricia sputtered. "This is business," Mike said. "We are not refusing service. We are simply adjusting our scheduling priorities. Your delivery will be completed next Tuesday. The forecast says it is going to be below zero this weekend. I need propane now. I suggest you contact one of those approved vendors you have been recommending to your neighbors. I believe you have a list." Patricia hung up without another word. Mike looked at me and grinned. That felt good, but we were not done. The route restructuring affected all of Willow Creek. not just Patricia. Within 3 days, we had a dozen angry calls from residents demanding to know why their deliveries were being delayed. Some of them were genuinely upset, and I felt bad about that. But Mike had a plan. He sent a letter to every Morrison Energy customer in Willow Creek Estates explaining the situation. The letter detailed how Patricia Henderson and the HOA board had systematically harassed our drivers, filed false police reports, and attempted to interfere with our business operations. It explained that due to these ongoing issues, we had been forced to deprioritize the community in our routing schedule. The letter concluded by suggesting that residents who wanted reliable, timely service should take their concerns directly to the HOA board and consider voting for new leadership. The letter was a bombshell. Residents who had been on the fence about Patricia suddenly realized that her power trip was directly affecting their ability to receive basic services. The Facebook group that Patricia had created to rally support against me became a forum for angry homeowners demanding her resignation. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following Tuesday evening. Although I was not a resident and could not attend, several of my customers texted me updates throughout the meeting. Apparently, it was chaos. Patricia attempted to maintain control, claiming that everything she had done was to protect the community. She insisted that Morrison Energy was retaliating against her personally, and that the homeowners should band together to file a class action lawsuit against the company. Then, one of the board members, a man named Arthur Schultz, who owned a small accounting firm, stood up with a stack of documents. "I have been reviewing our HOA finances," Arthur said, "and I have discovered some irregularities." The room went silent. Arthur explained that he had noticed several unusual expenses over the past 6 months. When he dug deeper, he found that Patricia had been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses. There were charges for spa treatments, expensive dinners, and clothing, all categorized as community outreach or administrative costs. "These charges total over $8,000, Arthur said. "And that is just what I have found so far." Patricia tried to defend herself, claiming that all of those expenses were legitimate business costs for maintaining the HOA's image and conducting community relations. But the residents were not buying it. Someone called for an immediate vote to suspend Patricia from the board pending an investigation. The motion passed overwhelmingly. Patricia stormed out of the meeting, shouting that she would sue everyone in the room. Her small group of loyal followers left with her, but even they looked shaken by the financial revelations. Within a week, the HOA hired a forensic accountant to audit their books. The findings were even worse than Arthur had initially discovered. Patricia had embezzled over $15,000 from the HOA over the past 18 months. She had been systematically padding expenses, approving fake invoices from shell companies, and even writing herself checks for services that were never rendered. The board filed a police report, and Patricia Henderson was arrested for theft and fraud. Her lawyer husband, who had threatened to bury Morrison Energy in lawsuits, suddenly became very quiet. It turned out he had some ethical issues of his own that were being investigated by the State Bar Association. The local news covered Patricia's arrest extensively. Amanda Foster from Channel 7 did a follow-up segment about how an HOA president's power trip had led to criminal charges. They interviewed me on camera, and I explained how her harassment had started over something as simple as propane deliveries. "This just goes to show," I said, looking directly at the camera, "that people in positions of power, even small positions in homeowners associations, need to be held accountable. What started as unreasonable demands and harassment ended up exposing fraud that hurt an entire community. With Patricia removed from the board, the new HOA leadership immediately rescinded all of her arbitrary policies. They sent a formal apology to Morrison Energy and invited us to resume normal service in the community. Mike and I agreed, and I went back to my original route schedule. The Garcias invited me in for coffee the first time I came back to make a delivery. They were so relieved to have everything back to normal. "We were so worried," Mrs. Garcia said, pouring me a cup. "When Patricia was fining everyone, we thought we might have to sell our house. We cannot afford those kinds of penalties on our fixed income." "I am just glad it all worked out," I said. "You stood up to her," Mr. Garcia said, his voice shaking slightly. "A lot of people were afraid to do that. You kept doing your job even when she tried to stop you." I felt uncomfortable with the praise. I was just trying to help my customers. Jennifer Brooks, the single mother, stopped me the next time I made a delivery to her house. Her 2 kids ran out to see the propane truck, which they thought was cool for some reason. "Thank you," Jennifer said, tears in her eyes. "I know you had nothing to do with the investigation, but if you had not stood up to her in the first place, none of this would have come out. She would have kept stealing from us and making our lives miserable." "You stood up to her too," I reminded her. "You did not back down even when she threatened you." The criminal case against Patricia Henderson moved through the courts over the next several months. Her lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in being lenient. The case had received too much media attention, and Patricia had shown no remorse for her actions. The trial was scheduled for late September. The prosecution had a mountain of evidence including bank records, fake invoices, and testimony from the forensic accountant. They also had testimony from multiple HOA board members and residents about Patricia's pattern of abuse of power. I was called to testify about her harassment campaign against Morrison Energy and how she had used her position to threaten residents who did not comply with her demands. I spent 3 hours on the witness stand, walking through every interaction I had with her, every time she blocked my truck, every false police report she filed. Patricia's defense attorney tried to paint me as a disgruntled employee who was exaggerating the situation, but the prosecutor had video evidence from my truck's dash camera and body camera footage from the police responses. There was no denying what had happened. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts including theft, fraud, and embezzlement. Patricia showed no emotion as the verdict was read, but I saw her husband's face fall. He knew this was the end of their comfortable life. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. He talked about how Patricia had abused a position of trust, stolen from her neighbors, and used her authority to intimidate and harass people who were just trying to live their lives. "This court has seen many cases of HOA board members who lose sight of their purpose," the judge said. "But your actions go far beyond overzealous rule enforcement. You stole from your community. You manipulated and bullied residents. You filed false police reports and wasted public resources. You showed a pattern of behavior that demonstrates a complete lack of regard for anyone but yourself." He sentenced her to 3 years in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA, plus additional fines and court costs. Her husband filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The Willow Creek HOA used the media attention to completely restructure their governing documents. They implemented term limits for board members, required regular financial audits, and created a resident oversight committee to prevent any future abuse of power. Several other HOAs in the area reached out to learn from their experience and update their own policies. As for me, life went back to normal relatively quickly. I continued driving my route, delivering propane to grateful customers throughout central New Jersey. The winter after Patricia's conviction was particularly cold, and I was busier than ever. Every time I drove through Willow Creek Estates, someone would wave or stop to chat. The community felt different now, lighter somehow, without Patricia's oppressive rules hanging over everything. Mike called me into his office one afternoon in December, almost a full year after this whole mess started. I worried I was in trouble for something, but he was smiling. "Corporate wants to give you a bonus," he said, sliding an envelope across his desk. "They said your handling of the Patricia Henderson situation saved the company from a major legal headache and generated positive publicity when it could have gone the other way." Inside the envelope was a check for $5,000 and a letter of commendation. I was stunned. "I was just doing my job," I said. "You were doing more than that," Mike said. "You stood your ground when someone tried to bully you. You documented everything properly. You kept your cool even when she was making false accusations. That takes character." The money was nice, but honestly, the best reward was knowing that the Garcias, Jennifer Brooks, and all those other families could get their propane deliveries without hassle. It was knowing that an entire community was free from someone who had been making their lives miserable. A few months after the trial, I was making a delivery to Ryan Chen, the guy who had first warned me about Patricia's power trip. He came out to chat while I was filling his tank. "Hey, you hear about the new HOA president?" he asked. "No, who did they elect?" "Arthur Schultz, the accountant who found all the financial irregularities. He is already doing a great job. Very transparent, actually listens to residents, and he is working on rolling back a bunch of the stupid rules Patricia implemented." "That is great," I said. "Yeah, and get this," Ryan continued. "He proposed that the HOA give you some kind of community service award for exposing Patricia's corruption. It got voted down because you are not a resident, but the fact that he suggested it shows how much things have changed." I laughed. "I do not need an award. I just need clear driveways and customers who pay their bills on time." "Speaking of which," Ryan said, pulling out his phone, "I am paying right now. Hey, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Were you ever actually worried?" "I mean, Patricia kept threatening lawsuits and trying to get you fired. Did you think it might work?" I considered the question. "Honestly, a little bit. She had money and connections, and I am just a delivery driver, but I knew I was doing the right thing. These were people who needed heat for their homes. No HOA rule should ever come before basic human needs like that." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "That is what a lot of us should have said from the beginning, but it is easier to go along with someone like Patricia than to stand up to them. She made examples out of people who challenged her. The Robinsons down the street got hit with so many fines for petty violations that they almost went bankrupt. Nobody wanted to be next." "I get that," I said, "but that is exactly how people like her maintain power. They count on everyone being too afraid to fight back." As I drove away from Ryan's house that day, I thought about how close things had come to going differently. If Morrison Energy had decided the hassle was not worth it and stopped servicing Willow Creek entirely, Patricia would have won. If the residents had not finally banded together to challenge her, she might still be in charge, stealing money and making people miserable. Sometimes I wonder if Patricia ever understood the irony of the whole situation. She got caught because she pushed too hard over something as mundane as propane deliveries. If she had just left well enough alone, kept her theft quiet and less ambitious, she might have gotten away with it for years. But her need to control everything, to dominate and intimidate, led directly to her downfall. The following winter was one of the coldest on record. I was working overtime, making deliveries 6 days a week to keep up with demand. Every time I drove through Willow Creek Estates, I remembered that first confrontation with Patricia, her blocking my truck with her white Lexus, her smug expression as she handed me her business card. Mrs. Garcia called me directly one particularly brutal day when the temperature was hovering around 5 degrees. "Travis, I hate to bother you, but we are getting low again. Is there any way you could fit us in today? I have 2 more stops and then I will head your way," I told her. "Should be there around 4. You are a lifesaver." Literally. When I arrived at the Garcia's house that afternoon, both of them came out to thank me. Mr. Garcia moved slowly with his walker, but he insisted on making the trip down the driveway. "We wanted you to have this," he said, handing me a card. Inside was a gift certificate to a local restaurant and a note thanking me for my kindness and integrity. "This is too much," I protested. "It is not enough," Mrs. Garcia said firmly. "You have no idea how scared we were last winter. We are in our 80s. We could not survive without heat, and that woman was going to fine us $500 we did not have. You stood up for us when we could not stand up for ourselves." I accepted the gift, feeling humbled. These were the moments that made the job worthwhile. Not the bonus or the news coverage, but knowing that I had helped people who needed it. The story of Patricia Henderson became something of a legend in the propane delivery community. Other drivers I met at industry conferences had heard about it. Mike told me that our training program now included a segment on dealing with HOA interference, using my experience as a case study. "You are famous," he joked. "The driver who took down an HOA board president." "I did not take her down," I corrected. "She took herself down. I just kept doing my job." But Mike had a point. My decision to restructure my routes and deprioritize Willow Creek had been the catalyst that finally united the residents against Patricia. If I had just continued to put up with her harassment, or if Morrison Energy had quietly stopped servicing the area, nothing would have changed. About 2 years after Patricia's conviction, I got a call from Amanda Foster, the reporter who had originally covered the story. She was working on a follow-up piece about HOA reform in New Jersey and wanted to interview me again. We met at a coffee shop in Maplewood. Amanda had a stack of notes and a recording device. "So, Patricia Henderson is up for parole in a few months," Amanda said. "How do you feel about that?" I shrugged. "I do not really think about her much anymore. I hope she learned something from all this, but that is not really my concern. A lot of the Willow Creek residents I have spoken with are worried she might try to move back to the area. I doubt that will happen. Her ex-husband sold their house and moved out of state. She has no real ties to the community anymore. Do you ever worry about retaliation?" I had not really considered it. "Not particularly. What is she going to do? She is a convicted felon with no money and no power. The worst thing she ever did to me was waste my time and annoy me. I can handle annoying." Amanda smiled. "You are remarkably zen about the whole thing." "I've had 2 years to process it," I said. "At the time, yeah, I was angry. She was making my job harder and putting vulnerable people at risk. But in the end, justice was served. The system worked the way it was supposed to." The follow-up piece aired a few weeks later. It focused on legislative efforts to increase HOA transparency and accountability in New Jersey. My interview was just a small part of it, but Amanda did a good job connecting Patricia's case to the broader issue of HOA overreach. Several months later, I heard through the grapevine that Patricia's parole had been denied. She would serve her full sentence. I felt nothing about the news, no satisfaction or vindication, just a mild acknowledgement that her punishment continued. Life moved forward. I got promoted to senior driver, which came with a small raise and the responsibility of training new employees. Sarah and I got engaged. The Garcias celebrated their 60th wedding anniversary. Jennifer Brooks' kids started high school. Willow Creek Estates continued to be a peaceful, well-managed community under Arthur Schultz's leadership. One evening, almost 3 years after everything started, I was making a late delivery in Willow Creek. It was a warm summer night, and kids were playing in yards while their parents sat on porches, enjoying the weather. I waved to a few people I recognized as I drove through the winding streets. As I was finishing up my delivery, Arthur Schultz happened to walk by with his dog. He stopped to chat. "Hey Travis, how have you been?" "Good, busy with wedding planning." "Congratulations. When is the big day?" "October. Small ceremony, just family and close friends." "That sounds perfect." Arthur paused, then said, "You know, I think about that whole situation with Patricia pretty often. It was such a dark time for this community." "Seems like you guys recovered pretty well." "We did, but it was a wake-up call. We realized we had given one person way too much unchecked authority. Now we have a system of oversight and accountability. Multiple people have to sign off on any expense over $500. We publish detailed financial reports quarterly. We even have a resident ombudsman who people can go to if they feel the board is overstepping." "That is really impressive," I said. "It should have always been that way," Arthur replied. "But sometimes it takes a crisis to make people see what needs to change. Patricia was our crisis, and in a weird way, I guess we should thank her for showing us our weaknesses." I did not think Patricia deserved any thanks, but I understood what Arthur meant. Bad situations can lead to positive changes if people are willing to learn and adapt. As I drove home that night, my truck empty and my workday done, I reflected on how strange life could be. 3 years ago, I thought I was just making a routine propane delivery. I had no idea it would lead to confrontations, news coverage, a criminal trial, and ultimately, systematic reform in how HOAs operated in my area. The experience taught me that standing your ground matters, that documentation matters, that individual actions, even from someone as ordinary as a propane delivery driver, can make a difference when confronted with abuse of power. I never set out to be a hero or a whistleblower. I just wanted to do my job and help my customers stay warm. But when someone tried to stop me from doing that, I pushed back. And sometimes, that is all it takes. Patricia Henderson is still in prison as I write this, serving out the remainder of her sentence. I do not know what she thinks about during her time there, whether she feels remorse or still believes she was in the right. I do not particularly care. What I care about is that Mrs. Garcia has heat in the winter, that Jennifer Brooks can afford to keep her house warm for her kids, that Ryan Chen and all the other residents of Willow Creek Estates can live their lives without fear of arbitrary fines and harassment from a power-hungry board president. The white Lexus with the HOA boss vanity plate is long gone, sold to pay restitution. Patricia's empire of petty tyranny collapsed completely. And every winter, when I drive through Willow Creek Estates making my deliveries, I am reminded that sometimes the smallest stands against injustice can have the biggest impacts. My job is not glamorous. I drive a truck, fill propane tanks, collect payments, and move on to the next customer. But I do it with the knowledge that I am providing an essential service, helping people stay safe and comfortable in their homes. And nobody, not even an HOA president who thought she controlled everything, can take that away from me. That is the real victory in all of this. Not Patricia's conviction or the money she had to pay back, but the simple fact that I can still pull up to 428 Maple Ridge Drive, hook up my hose, and deliver propane to the Garcias without anyone blocking my truck or threatening me with fake bylaws. That is what matters. That is what I fought for. And that is what I won.